Hey there, today I'm going to show you how to can clams. So this is pressure canning clams. As you can see behind me, we like to can things in part because it helps to free up space in our freezer, but also we don't have to worry about power outages and things like that in terms of preservation. And finally, it just makes it very convenient for us to come home and whip up a quick dinner without having to worry about thawing anything. It's a very convenient and easy way to store food for long periods of time. So in order to get started, if you watched a previous video of mine, we went out to Puget Sound and harvested a large number of gaper clams, and I've got those all completely deshelled and cleaned up, got the sand out of them. I got about 10 pounds of clam meat here, so quite a bit. I'm going to be canning these in half-pint jars since that's just about the right size for a two-person meal, whether we're making pasta or clam chowder or fritters or anything like that. You can get a little bit over a third of a pound of meat into each half pint. So we're looking at a pretty good quantity of canned clams. For this process, you're going to need some sort of pressure canner or cooker. You can do this on your stovetop, or you can do it outside on a propane stove like I'm going to be doing today in order to stop the kitchen from smelling like seafood. And then you'll need a couple other tools. One tool for lifting the jars out of the canner, a lid remover. You should be using, you can reuse your old jars, but you'll need fresh lids and then the screw tops to hold them on during the canning process. We will be canning at 11 pounds, 10 to 11 pounds pressure, so you'll need the correct weight for your canner. And then we're going to use just a little food processor here to mince the clams up in batches and before we stuff them into the jars. And then a little bit of lemon juice, which is critical in this process. I'm going to go through following the USDA procedures for canning clams as recommended by them. We've always done that in the past and had no issues with our canned clams, having them last for several years, no problem on the shelf. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our clam meat into boiling water for 2 minutes. That's had 2 tablespoons of lemon juice added, and we'll get started with that right now. All along this process, you'll be getting juice off of these clams, so just go ahead and save that because we can use that to put in the jars to top them off just before canning them. The next step will be to drain the boiled clam meat. Okay, so now we've got our meat here and I've got the jars. I'm reusing old jars, so make sure if you're going to reuse old jars that you inspect thoroughly the rim of the jar, make sure there's no chips. Look around the jar, make sure there's no cracks. That way you don't end up wasting a perfectly good can of clams. And then I have new lids. I like to use new lids when pressure canning. Sometimes I'll reuse lids when I'm pickling and things like that, water bath canning, but when it comes to pressure canning, I really prefer to use new lids. So make sure you get the appropriately sized lids. So what we're going to do now is we're going to process small batches of the clam. We're going to mince it up. I don't want it to be really mushy. I just want smaller bits which go well in chowders and in fritters and in pastas and things like that. And then we're going to stuff the clam meat into the cans. Like I said, you're going to get a little bit more than a third of a pound of meat in each one, and then you're going to top it off with clam juice. If you don't have enough clam juice to cover it and you still want 1 inch of head space from the top of the can down to the liquid, you want to fill that up with a little bit of water. You can use boiling water. You can add a little bit of salt to that, so about a half of a tablespoon per quart. So you might want to get a big pot of water boiling on the stovetop, ready to top off your can of clams. And then we'll put the lids on and seal them up. So let's get started on processing these clams. So not looking to fill the whole processor, just a little bit, and then we're going to pulse it. So there's the consistency we're looking for, lots of small shredded bits with a little bit bigger bits for texture. We're going to go ahead and start stuffing this into the cans. Okay, you can use a funnel to help keep the rim of the jars clean, or you can actually just put a screw lid on there to keep it clean. I'm going to use a funnel just to get it started, and then I'll finish it off by hand. You want to make sure you have about 1 inch of space at the top of the jar. And then we're going to top that off with either boiling water or clam juice. Okay, so we got 18 half pints, which came out to just about a half pound. The clam, it actually sits in there really nice, a little bit easier than, say, salmon and stuff I've done in the past. So what we're going to do now is we're going to top off with a little bit of this clam juice. Okay, so what we're going to do is go ahead and I'm going to give my lids just a quick wash in some warm soapy water and then get them rinsed off. And then we're going to wipe down the rims of these jars to make sure we get a good seal. A trick that I like to use is to use a little bit of vinegar and a paper towel. So dip the paper towel in there and rub it along the rim there. It really gives it a nice shiny luster, and it seems to get a better seal when you do that. So just get a small bowl, put a little bit of vinegar in there, and start wiping those rims down after you wash your lids. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and start putting the lids on after we've got all of these rims cleaned up. So just go through and systematically do this. All right, we'll start putting those rings on firm, but don't over tighten, just firm. Okay, so now we're going to load the canner. So you want to make sure that you're not putting your jars right on the bottom. You want to use a spacer. And we're going to stack these in here. You do not want to double stack them because that causes them to rattle around and make them crack. So just one layer. So in one layer we can get 8 jars. And we'll just add another spacer. You can buy extra spacers, especially if you're doing a lot of half pints. You can really stack them in these taller canners. Now I'm going to fill this with water. Everybody's canner is going to be different in terms of recommendations, but these pressure canning times for meats are very long, 60 minutes for clams. So I tend to go on the upper end of their recommended amount of water. So I'll be doing 3 quarts of water in here, and I'm going to add a little bit of either lemon juice or vinegar. The acid in there will help to keep the smell down just in case a jar breaks. It also just seems like it makes it easier to clean at the end, so you don't get that super fishy smell stuck in your canner if you happen to get a jar that breaks or boils over. That's why you do not want to overstuff your jars. You're more likely to get a boil over or breakage or failure. If you give them 1 inch of headspace, you won't have that issue as frequently. All right, let's get water dumped in here, and we'll get the stove outside fired up shortly thereafter. Okay, so I just use a Camp Chef 2-burner so I can run 2 canners at a time, especially when I get into tuna season. But for clam, we're just going to use 1. Go ahead and fire this up. There we go. Whew. All right, to begin with, I'm going to start with a medium to medium-high heat. I don't want to go really hot, heating up all the jars in here super fast, because then it's more likely to crack and break. So I give it a good 5-10 minutes at a medium-high heat. Then I'll come up and crank it up. And we're waiting for steam to start releasing from this valve here. So we shouldn't be building any pressure yet. Make sure you clean your gaskets and things like that regularly and check for any obstructions here. And then once this starts to vent, we'll let that vent for 10 minutes. Okay, you can see it's venting out the top of that little pipe at the top. It's kind of hard to see, but I can hear it coming out. We're going to let it do that for 10 minutes, and then we're going to apply the weight. Okay, now that's been venting for 10 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and add that weight, and we should start to get pressure build. This will pop up first when there's sufficient pressure. There it goes. And then the dial will start to come up as pressure builds up. When it gets up to 10, 11 pounds, this will start to wobble. We'll come back and visit that and try and show you just kind of the right amount of pressure you want to maintain. Okay, now as this approaches 10, 11 pounds pressure, that's going to start to wobble. You hear it making like a train-like sound. That weight is releasing the pressure to keep it at 10, 11 pounds pressure. This is where you can dial back the heat a little bit so you get a nice, just slow wobble. That's kind of what I look for right there, is just that slow wobble, maintaining it right at 11 pounds pressure. Now we're going to set a timer for 60 minutes and let these clams pressure can. Okay, it's been 60 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the heat here real quick. Now we don't remove the pressure weight on the top, we just let it naturally come down to 0 on its own until this little button right here drops, and then we can take the lid off. If you take it off too soon and let it depressurize rapidly, it can cause the cans to crack. Okay, so the pressure's finally dropped all the way down. You'll see this little button has dropped. That actually took about 30-40 minutes after I turned off the heat. So now we can go ahead and take the lid off. I'm going to go and take it inside and remove the canned clams from the pressure. All right, so I'm going to put clams right there. Now we can go ahead and remove the lid from the pressure canner, and I have this little tool that will allow me to easily pull the cans out without burning myself. So be very careful because the pressure canner is very hot. Don't release a lot of steam the first time you open it, and you don't want to burn yourself, so you can just quickly move your hand away. Definitely smells like canned clams. You can hear the lids already popping and sealing. That's normal. That's a good sound if you are a at-home canner. Okay, so you want to go ahead and just use this lifting tool to pull out a jar. First one's always the hardest. Looks like one must have cracked somewhere. You want to put them onto a towel so that they don't have a hot jar hitting a cold surface and they might crack. That one's still boiling, as you can tell. So you can see here, this one has no liquid in it. It cracked on the bottom. I'm still going to be able to extract the meat out of there and just freeze it. But the lid, you can see it's got the little dimples still up. Whereas if you look at the other lids, the dimple is down. It has formed a seal. So I'll just let these cool and then put them up into our pantry. Okay, well that does it for my canning clam video. I will put links to the National Food Preservation website, which draws their information from the USDA on proper procedures for canning clams. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time out on the water or in the kitchen. And just remember, fish smarter, not harder. Bye guys.